Hello and welcome to Web Development 101 with Alex Merced. On this show, we'll talk about all the basic concepts of web development in a way that anyone can understand, whether it's front-end web development, back-end web development, and full-stack web development. If you're new to web development, I recommend listening from episode 1 to understand all the concepts from beginning to end. You can also learn more about my own personal projects over there at alexmercedcoder.com. Thank you. Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced, and today we're going to be talking about more web development stuff because you're listening to Web Development 101, and today we're going to be talking about JavaScript. So this is sort of the last of the three main technologies, but though JavaScript is a very vast universe that literally there are podcasts that literally just talk about JavaScript day in and day out because there's just that much going on in JavaScript. And you'll kind of learn, if you did that Dash program and then also did the course on SoloLearn, the SoloLearn app, you probably have a pretty good foundation now in JavaScript but let's get into it. So JavaScript is essentially a programming language. It was built for the web and can basically allow your website to do more dynamic things. So in the same way you had HTML files that had your HTML, the structure of your website, the structure of your content, then you had CSS and CSS files that styled and made your content's appearance. JavaScript files, .js files, will then do all sorts of really cool stuff. Probably most importantly, DOM manipulation. So again, DOM stands for Document Object Model. This is that sort of hierarchy of elements on your HTML page. And basically with JavaScript, you can manipulate that, meaning you could create new child tags. So even though you don't maybe you don't have a picture that's currently on your website, JavaScript can then create that image and put it on your website. So it may not be in the HTML file that you put on there, but it's in the HTML that the client's browser is receiving because the JavaScript put it there, and it's changing their experience of what the browser is rendering. So again, you got to always remember, there's the document object model, meaning what the browser is seeing versus your actual HTML, JavaScript, and CSS files. Because essentially what happens is that it's taking this stuff and then rendering it, and then the JavaScript is rendering manipulating the HTML that your browser is rendering in its own sort of DOM that's occurring. Okay, so. But with JavaScript, it's just like programming where, you assign variables, you can create functions, you can create classes. So I'm not going to get into sort of the wild and expansive world of programming concepts right now. Maybe we'll do that later. I just want to kind of give you guys the layout of the different technologies. So that way, when you go to learn it and use many of the cool courses that are on Facebook, YouTube, on Udemy, Skillshare, you kind of go into it knowing what you're going to learn. And JavaScript has gone through many versions over the years. So what used to happen is that every few years you'd be a big update to JavaScript that would add all sorts of new functions, new features, new syntax. The last one they did, and it's all based on a larger language called ECMAScript or ESCMAScript. Okay, usually just said ES. Okay, and then that framework gets a new version every so often, and then it's up to browsers to then make use of those new standards. Okay, so browsers get updated, and so if you use old browsers, they're not going to know what to do with a lot of newer HTML, CSS, and JavaScript stuff. That's where you start getting into sort of compatibility issues. But the most recent version is ES6, and this is where we added all sorts of cool features, arrow functions, promises. That right now, if you're new to this, it's not going to mean much to you, but it's cool stuff. Okay, that made people's lives easier and allowed people to do cooler stuff with their websites. And then in the early days, there's certain things that those things address that weren't as easily addressed in the past, or syntax that was just hard, a lot of typing to do. So people have created libraries on top of JavaScript that make life easier. In the same way that people created CSS frameworks like Bootstrap, people created JavaScript frameworks that either allow you to do a variety of things. So one of the most popular frameworks for the longest period of time was something called jQuery. And jQuery would create a special syntax. Like, it's so popular that in Solo Learn, there's actually a separate course just for jQuery. But the benefit of jQuery is that it would create an easier syntax, especially for DOM manipulation. So if you wanted to, like, say, because usually in like JavaScript, let's say I want to refer to a particular tag with a particular class, I would have to type in like, or a particular ID. I would have to be like, okay, document dot get element by ID, and then dot whatever I'm editing and whatnot. While in jQuery, you might just have to type in like something simple like a $sign and the name of the element or whatnot. I'm actually not super familiar with jQuery just because I'm just getting into sort of web development more recently. So I did the jQuery course a while back. A lot of that's faded just because I haven't really used it, mainly because there's a reason why a lot of people are starting to move away from jQuery. The reason being is that it's a big file. Okay, so basically, if you only use what a lot of people still use jQuery for is what's called an API call or AJAX calls. So this is probably going to be something that I have to do a whole separate episode on because this is huge. But basically, an API, to keep it simple for now, allows one website to get information and talk to sort of another website. And you have to code sort of that conversation. And jQuery had a very easy syntax for making those calls to get that information, to post information to another website. But sometimes that's the only thing you'd be using from jQuery. But then you would include the whole jQuery file, and that would slow down your website because when you include a separate file, you're including everything that's in it. People have dealt with this in different ways by breaking it up into different libraries. So I think now you can actually just get the AJAX portion of jQuery as a separate library. So that way you don't have to get the rest of jQuery if you're not using it. But that was the thing. So people started, and then plus a lot of those things that people use the most of jQuery have been addressed in other frameworks in different ways and whatnot that made this. So people have started moving away. So there's still a lot of people who use jQuery a lot. It's still a very popular way of doing a lot of things and make things a lot easier. And one of the things you have to always keep in mind when you're getting into, if you're talking about professional work as a developer, is that you may go, the newer standards may be one thing, but when you go work for a company, their website may have been made years ago when there was different standards. So you need to make sure you know those older standards because that's what's being used for that particular website. And they're not going to redesign the whole website right now because standards changed. So this is why still a lot of older server-side languages are still used a lot because websites that were designed 10, 20 years ago, they may have replaced certain pieces of it, but still large core chunks of it are done in the older way. Okay, so basically, you kind of always want to be aware of these things. But there's a lot. And then the thing is that JavaScript goes beyond that. So what happened, I think, was JavaScript, I think it's added to the browser in 1996. That's when the first JavaScript engine, I think, comes out. And what a JavaScript engine is, it's the actual engine within the browser that says, okay, when you see the JavaScript code, this is how you make it look like, or this is how it will work. And there's I think 2 or 3 of them. One made by Firefox, one made by Google, one made by Microsoft. I think the one made by Google is sort of the most popular one because that's what's in the Chrome browser. And then the one made by Firefox is in the Firefox browser. And then there's the one made by. So they're while most of the time identical in the way they interpret JavaScript, there are minor differences that one needs to be aware of. I forget which. So then what happens? And again, this will be a topic that we'll definitely go into a lot more depth in another episode. Is that for the longest time, JavaScript was just a browser thing, okay? Basically, you would use JavaScript to add these JS files that would affect how the website would be manipulated within the browser on the client side. So again, from on your side, once the server sent you the information, your browser was the one who was doing all the rendering. And again, there's the whole back end where basically people are using other programming languages to do stuff on the server. And JavaScript was never really used for that until someone came up with this thing called Node.js. And first people thought it was like a crazy or stupid idea. It's like, why would you want to use JavaScript, on the back end? But several things happen. There's a masterclass on Udemy. On Skillshare. So I have a Skillshare subscription, and there's this Node.js masterclass. And like the first 4 or 5 videos is just the history of this, and it's actually really fascinating, sort of how Node.js evolved and why it ended up becoming a big thing. Sort of, it's a pretty cool story. But the bottom line is this: basically, they created this project that created a software, Node.js, that allows JavaScript to be run server side. And this opened up a whole new world of what you could do with JavaScript. As far as, now you could manipulate. And when you're thinking the back end, really we're talking about, okay, we're creating a database where there's data stored remotely, and it's all about manipulating that data, delivering that data, rendering that data out onto the different files so that way the user can use it. Because again, once upon a time, the internet was so slow that all the information was stored on your computer. So basically, a website would then create a file on your computer with the information. And for you to be able to use that same information, you'd have to be at the same computer. Now, computers are fast enough that all the data can be stored more remotely in the cloud, per se. And basically, you can go access the same information anywhere. Okay, and so now there's a need for servers to be able to do a lot more complicated things to manage that data. Cool. So then JavaScript became a language that works in the front end and back end. I think is the only one that does, which has really been a big contributor to the growth of JavaScript and basically JavaScript framework. So now when you say JavaScript framework, you're talking about a really wide world of front end and back end frameworks and libraries and whatnot. So JavaScript is a huge universe unto itself. And we're going to be talking about a lot of those frameworks and a lot of that stuff as we go on, along with other programming languages. But that's it for today, so that we have a kind of an introduction to JavaScript and the world of JavaScript. But I recommend checking out those resources I've mentioned over the last few episodes, so that way you can start learning a lot of this stuff. And that way you'll start really benefiting as we go on, and we start talking about some of these more complex technologies and why they matter and why they're cool. So have a great day and enjoy.